Can't even buy a proper car some trust fund. Loser. My brother mocked at the family reunion. Laughter erupted around the table. I didn't say a word. Then his phone buzzed with a notification from the trust attorney. Annual audit of beneficiary expenses. IQ assessment required. The humiliation continued. Later I was standing near the old oak barrels, just trying to blend in when my brother Ethan started holding court. He raised his glass of our most expensive reserve, making sure everyone could hear him. And the pièce de résistance, he announced, is the new cellar. Custom built. $1.5 million, all endowment funded. Should be done by spring. The crowd murmured in approval. My cousin Chloe, standing beside him, touched his arm. It's going to be iconic, Ethan. A true testament to the Hawthorne brand. Ethan looked over at me, his smile tight, predatory. See, Olivia? That's what you do with a legacy. You build on it. You make it bigger. You don't just hide it in dusty books. I just nodded. I took a sip of water and said nothing. People always ask me that in hindsight. Why did I just stand there year after year listening to this? Why didn't I scream? Why didn't I tell them who I was? They don't understand the trap of endurance. Endurance isn't passive. It's not weakness. It's an active, agonizing daily choice. For 7 years, I wasn't just taking their insults. I was collecting them. My grandfather's letter, the one I kept locked away, had turned my life into a long-term psychological test. He wanted to see what they would become when they thought they had all the power and I had none. But this test had a price. Every time I had to force a smile while Ethan called my job dusty, every time I nodded while my grandmother Barbara criticized my common clothes, it felt like swallowing a small piece of glass. It was a 7-year experiment in humiliation. I was the shepherd forced to wear the black sheep's wool just to observe how viciously the rest of the flock would turn on one of their own. My silence wasn't weakness. It was a cage. And as I stood there watching Ethan soak in the applause for a cellar, I had personally approved the wiring transfer, for I knew the experiment was finally mercifully coming to an end. So when my Uncle Mark stood on that stage in front of 200 people and publicly called for my competency review, I didn't feel shame. I didn't feel anger. I felt to relief. The trigger had finally been pulled. I didn't wait for the speech to end. I turned, walked out of the grand hall, the sound of polite applause fading behind me. The cool Napa night air hit my face. I pulled out my phone and dialed Julian Hayes, our family's longtime legal counsel. He picked up on the first ring. "Olivia," he said. His voice was calm, clinical. He had been waiting for this call for 7 years, too. "Julian," I said, my voice perfectly even. "They just did it." I heard him take a slow breath. Mark, I confirmed. In front of everyone, he formally requested a competency review questioning my understanding of the family brand. "Well," Julian said, and I could almost hear him smile, "your grandfather predicted this to the letter. What are your instructions?" I looked back at the winery, lit up like a palace against the dark hills. "Schedule it," I said. 10 a.m. tomorrow. The main conference room. "Who should I invite?" Julian asked. "Everyone," I said. "Everyone who was in that room tonight. Everyone who clapped. Summon all beneficiaries of the Hawthorne endowment. It's time to give them exactly what they asked for. A full and complete competency review. The news spread through the Hawthorne estate like wildfire. Julian Hayes was efficient. Within 30 minutes, every beneficiary had a formal, legally binding summons in their inbox for 10 a.m. the next morning. The atmosphere at the gala shifted immediately. The polite chatter stopped. People started looking at me differently. Not with anger, but with a kind of morbid curiosity, like I was a train wreck they couldn't look away from. They thought I was done. They thought Uncle Mark had finally cornered the dusty archivist, and that tomorrow's meeting was my public execution. My cousin Chloe walked past me shaking her head with a theatrical sigh, as if I was the biggest disappointment she'd ever seen. I left the gala, got into my 15-year-old Honda Civic, and drove back to my small rented apartment in town, away from the sprawling $400 million estate. I ordered takeout, something I rarely did, and reviewed the documents Julian had sent over. The numbers, the assets, the 7 years of meticulous records I had kept. My phone rang around 9 p.m. It was Ethan. "Olivia," he said, his voice dripping with that false older brother concern he always used before an attack. "Listen, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're making a massive mistake." I said nothing. I just listened. "You're actually going through with this A meeting. You're going to publicly defy Uncle Mark." "Are you insane?" he said, his voice rising. "You're committing family suicide, Liv. Just call him. Call him tonight. Apologize. Say you were stressed. Beg if you have to. Maybe he'll go easy on you." I finally spoke. "Beg for what, Ethan?" He scoffed. "For your allowance. For your place at the table. Do you have any idea what they're going to do to you tomorrow? They're going to cut you off. They're going to review your competency. And frankly, it's about time. You've been an embarrassment for years." "I appreciate your concern," I said, my voice flat, clinical. "I'll see you at 10 a.m. I hung up before he could respond. My phone rang again almost immediately. This time it was Grandmother Barbara. Her approach was different, softer, more dangerous. "Olivia, darling," she said, her voice full of feigned pity. "I am so worried about you. Your uncle is furious. We all are. But I want to help you. Help me, how grandmother. If you've made mistakes with your distributions, dear, if you've been irresponsible, or if you just don't understand these things, it's better to admit it now, privately, to me." She was offering me an exit ramp, a way to confess my incompetence before the public humiliation. "We can arrange counseling," she continued, financial oversight. "We can handle this quietly as a family. There is no need to involve the lawyers in a formal review that will only humiliate you and stain the Hawthorne brand." I pictured her sitting in her pristine $1 million study, obsessed as always with the brand. "That won't be necessary, Grandmother," I said. "I'm not embarrassed by my finances. I prefer transparency." There was a long, cold silence on the line. Her tone changed. The pity vanished, replaced by the sharp steel I knew so well. "Pride goes before a fall, Olivia. You were always the difficult one. You were always too proud to accept what this family gave you. Tomorrow you will learn humility. I just hope it's not too late for you." She hung up on me. I turned off my phone. I looked at the spreadsheet on my laptop screen, the one that detailed every wire transfer, every approved purchase. Ethan's $1.5 million cellar, Chloe's $5 million lifestyle brand request, Uncle Mark's secret negotiations with the land developers. They were all worried I was about to be humiliated for being poor. They had absolutely no idea that they were about to be audited for being fools. The competency review was happening just not for the person they expected. The main conference room at the estate was old-world luxury, a single massive mahogany table polished to a mirror shine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the vineyards, my vineyards. By 9:55 a.m., the room was full. Every Hawthorne beneficiary was there, buzzing with a smug, nervous energy. They looked like predators who were finally about to enjoy a long-awaited meal. Uncle Mark sat at the head of the table, flanked by Ethan and grandmother Barbara. They looked like a royal tribunal ready to pass judgment. I arrived at 9:58. I was still wearing my simple slacks and blouse from the county library. The room went quiet as I walked in. I didn't take the empty seat near the head of the table. I walked to the very end of the room and sat by the door alone. Ethan leaned over to Chloe and whispered something. They both laughed. At exactly 10 a.m., the main door opened. Julian Hayes entered, followed by 2 associates carrying heavy document boxes. Julian was in his late 60s, impeccably dressed, and possessed a calm, clinical demeanor that I had always admired. He was the only person aside from my grandfather who knew the entire truth. He placed his briefcase on the table, opened it, and looked at his watch. 10 o'clock. We shall begin. He looked directly at my uncle. This emergency meeting was called at the request of Mark Hawthorne for the purpose of a competency review regarding Olivia Hawthorne. Uncle Mark nodded, looking self-important. That's correct, Julian. We're all very concerned about her. Julian held up a hand, cutting him off. I will manage the proceedings. Before we address the review, I am legally required to clarify the governance structure of the Hawthorne endowment. He motioned to his associate, who put a slide up on the large screen. It was the cover page of my grandfather's will. As you all know, Julian continued, his voice echoing slightly in the tense room, the endowment valued at approximately $400 million funds, all family distributions. People nodded. This was basic information. Where some of you seem to be mistaken is in how the endowment is managed. It is not governed by a board. It is not governed by consensus. My client's will was explicit. The entire $400 million estate, its assets, its land, and its operations are controlled by a single individual, the sole executor and chief vintner. The room was dead silent. You could hear someone's pen drop. Julian paused, letting the weight of that sink in. That executor, he said, his eyes scanning the room before landing on me, was appointed by my client 7 years ago upon his passing, and that person is Olivia Hawthorne. It took 5 full seconds for the sound to register. It was Ethan who broke the silence. He barked out a laugh. What? That's absurd. Julian, no offense, but look at her. She's an archivist. She works in a dusty library. She is indeed a county archivist, Julian said, his voice dangerously calm. She also holds an MBA from Stanford and a master's degree in oenology, which is the study of winemaking. She graduated top of her class in both. Her dusty job was her choice. Her position as executor was her duty. The color drained from my grandmother's face. Chloe looked like she had been slapped. Julian continued, I will now introduce the endowment's chief investment officer, who has worked directly under Miss Hawthorne's supervision for 7 years. A man I knew well, David Chen stepped forward. For 7 years, Miss Hawthorne has directed all investment strategy for the endowment. She reviews every market position, every asset allocation. Uncle Mark finally found his voice. It was a strangled whisper. 400 million. The estate was only worth 200 million when father died. David Chen nodded. That is correct. In her 7 years as executor, Miss Hawthorne has grown the endowment's principal assets by $200 million after all distributions and expenses. The number hit the room like a physical force. My brother Ethan looked at me, his eyes wide with a new dawning horror. Wait, to my cellar. The $1.5 million cellar. I spoke for the first time. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence. I approved it, I said. The wire transfer went through in March. I signed off on it. Ethan's face went pale. He looked at Chloe, he looked at Mark, and they all finally, truly understood. They hadn't been mocking the family failure. They had been mocking their boss. I stood up. The scraping of my chair was the only sound in the tomb-silent room. I walked from the back of the table to the front, picking up the remote for the projector. Uncle Mark, who was still sitting, had to physically lean back in his chair to look up at me. "You wanted a competency review, Uncle Mark," I said, my voice calm, clinical. "You wanted an accounting. Very well. Let's review the accounts." I clicked to the next slide. It wasn't my bank statement. It was a detailed breakdown of their spending. "We'll call this the reverse audit," I said. "Let's start with you, Ethan." My brother flinched. "You've received approximately $7.2 million in distributions over 7 years, I said. "Your latest request, the $1.5 million custom cellar you announced last night. I approved that in March. You're welcome." I clicked again. "Chloe, you've received $6.8 million. Your pending request for $5 million to fund what you're calling a lifestyle brand art collective in France." That one I paused. Chloe's face turned red. "You paused it. You don't have the right." "I have the only right," I said, my voice cutting through hers. "And I paused it because it's a terrible investment. But it's more than that. It's a symptom." I looked at all of them. Ethan with his cellar, Chloe with her brand, my grandmother, Barbara, who had spent $300,000 last year on rebranding the wine labels. They had confused the illusion of power with the real thing. There are 2 kinds of power in this world. The first is performative power. It's the power of the empty wallet. It's loud, it's flashy, it's built on spending money to show people you have it. It's the Maserati, the $5 million vanity project, the custom cellar. It's a hollow shell. Then there's actual power. It's the power of the full wallet. It's quiet. It's invisible. It's the power that creates the value in the first place. My family had become experts at performative power. They'd spent 7 years showing off loud and proud while I quietly performed the actual work that funded their entire reality. They were the illusion. I was the source. "You all thought I didn't understand the Hawthorne brand," I said. "The truth is, I'm the only one who does. Which brings me to you, Uncle Mark." I clicked to the final slide. It was a legal document. "This," I said, "is the Posterity Clause in my grandfather's will, a section none of you apparently ever bothered to read. He didn't just leave me in charge of the money. He left me in charge of the land. The clause states, I continued that the primary duty of the executor is to protect the terroir, the soil, the water, the ecosystem above all else. The distributions are explicitly tied to the health of the land." Uncle Mark's face had gone from pale to a sickly gray. He knew what was coming. "You wanted a competency review, Mark. Here it is. While you were publicly accusing me of damaging the brand with my 15-year-old car, you were privately in negotiations with a real estate developer to sell off the 40 acres of protected buffer land on our eastern border." The room gasped. Grandmother Barbara looked at Mark, horrified. "Land," I said, "that protects our primary water source. You were going to let them build luxury condos, poisoning the one thing that gives this entire $400 million endowment its value. You weren't just damaging the brand, Uncle. You were planning to kill the company." You can't prove that," he stammered. "I can," I said. "I have the emails. I was copied on the entire chain. The developer thought I was your assistant." I looked at the entire shattered family. "This meeting is over. The competency review is complete. You all failed." Effective immediately, I announced, I am invoking the Posterity Clause. All family distributions are cut by 50%, indefinitely. Chaos erupted. Chloe screamed. Ethan stood up, knocking over his chair. You can't do that. I can, I said. And I am. That 50%, that redirected wealth, will now go into a new defense fund. Its sole purpose will be to buy back the buffer zones you tried to sell, Mark, and to place them in a permanent, unbreakable conservation trust. I looked at my uncle, my brother, my cousin, my grandmother. You wanted me to act like I understood the legacy. Congratulations, today I am. The meeting didn't just end, it fractured. People stood up, stunned, avoiding eye contact. Chloe was crying quietly into her hands. Ethan just stared at the slide detailing his canceled cellar, his face, a mask of disbelief. Uncle Mark looked like he had aged 20 years. As I gathered my papers, my grandmother Barbara approached me, leaning heavily on her cane. Her voice, usually so sharp and commanding, was just a whisper. Olivia, she said, your grandfather, he was a complicated man. I never understood why he loved the dirt of this place more than the brand. I see now, he put it in you. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was the closest she would ever get. Ethan was next. He walked up to me, his hands shaking. I don't know what to say, Liv. I've been a monster. Yes, you have, I said, not unkindly, just stating a fact. The things I said about your job, about your car. I know, I said. The question is, what will you say now? He just looked down, lost. Chloe was the last one. She came up to me, her eyes red and puffy. My art collective, she whispered. Was it really a bad idea? I looked at her. It wasn't an idea, Chloe. It was a $5 million vacation you wanted someone else to pay for. An idea involves work. It involves risk. You just wanted the ribbon cutting. She flinched, but she nodded. You're right, she said, her voice cracking. You're right. I've never actually worked for any of it. That, I thought, was the first true thing she had said all day. That evening I returned to my small apartment. The silence felt different. It wasn't the silence of endurance anymore. It was the silence of peace. I poured a glass of wine, not our most expensive reserve, just a simple Cabernet, and opened the small wooden box I kept in my desk. Inside was my grandfather's letter, the one he left for me and only me 7 years ago. My dearest Olivia, it began. If you are reading this, the test is over, and I am so sorry for the burden I placed on you. I had to choose one person to protect our family from itself, and I had to choose the only one who never wanted the money. I had to choose the gardener. Your cousins, your uncle. They love the idea of the winery. They love the brand, the status, the money it brings. But you, Olivia, you love the dirt. You love the archives, the history, the vines themselves. You understand that wealth isn't the harvest. Wealth is the soil. It's the terroir. It's the hard, patient work of protecting the source. I am giving you this power not to rule them, but to save them. They will hate you for it. They will call you incompetent, strange, a failure. They will mock you for living simply because your simplicity is a mirror to their waste. Let them. Endure it. Wait. Wait until the day they are so confident in their own superiority that they publicly demand to see your receipts. On that day, show them. Show them all. Don't do it with anger, Olivia. Do it with clarity. This is not revenge. It is accounting. You are the executor. You are the gardener. Your job is to pull the weeds so the vineyard can breathe again. I folded the letter. He had known. He had seen it all coming. The next morning, I woke up got dressed in my usual dusty work clothes, and drove my 15-year-old Honda to the county library. I spent the morning cataloging historical records from the 1890s. It was quiet, meticulous work. I loved it. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. Aunt Olivia. This is Alex. Ethan's son. I stared at the message. Alex was 16. Another text came through. Dad told me what happened. I'm sorry. For how everyone treated you, I wanted to ask. You know about that conservation fund. You're starting with the money you took back. I'm studying environmental science in school. I was wondering if maybe I could volunteer. Help you with the land. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. My grandfather was wrong about one thing. This wasn't just accounting. This was redemption. If you have ever felt like the one on the outside, the black sheep, the dusty one, the one who just doesn't fit. If you have ever been in a room full of people who are supposed to love you, but you've never felt more alone, if you've been told your values are wrong, that your quiet passion is weird, that your car is too old or your clothes are too simple, please know this. The person who is the quietest in the room is often the one seeing the most. The person who doesn't need to show off is the one with the least to prove. Your endurance is not weakness. It is a form of power, a silent collection of data. You are not on the sidelines. You are in the perfect position to see the whole picture. Keep doing your work. Keep protecting what you believe in. Your time is not coming. It is already here. You just have to decide when to stand up and present your audit.